Hello, my name is David and I'm from Excel Consulting, and in this video I'm going to show you Excel's Pareto chart and why I love it. And it's for unexpected ways actually. So, first let's explain a little bit about the Pareto chart. So, this guy called Vilfredo Pareto in Italy came up with this concept called the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto principle. Now what that means is he started noticing things where 80% and 20% were limited. For example, he noticed that 20% of the people owned 80% of the land in Italy. And a few of these other kind of situations where there was 20-80. Later on in business, this became a more commonly known concept, and people thought, could it apply to other things? And one of the things that it applies to is that generally, 80% of your work comes from 20% of the people in your team. Or 20% of customers don't use 80% of software features. They only use 20% of the features. Or looking at complaints, 80% of typically complaints, 80% of them come from 20% of customers. So that's not why I love the Pareto chart, and that's for a completely different reason, which is actually the features that it gives. So it does provide you with a cumulative line that sort of allows you to measure this 80-20 principle, but it also gives you thick bars, aggregates them automatically, and then sorts them. So let's see what I mean. So let me open up Excel here, and here I've got some data. And I've got actor and minutes, and I've got repeated values here. This is the Avengers, for anyone who notices. So I select them, and if I go to a normal bar chart, normal column chart, this is what I get. It doesn't aggregate them together if they have the same name. But if I do the same thing, and I go to Insert and choose this one, these are the statistical charts. Pareto is this one here. If I do that, it automatically aggregates them and sorts them from top to lowest, which is pretty cool. It does what a pivot table would do. So this is essentially like a pivot chart that's already there. Plus, you can sort them. It is impossible to sort a chart without going back to the source data, unless it's a pivot chart again. And it makes the bars thicker. You can, of course, right-click, format data series, and change the gap width like you can with a normal chart. So if you want it to still be a little bit thicker, you can do that. But generally, I keep it like that, or at least I do it to about 50 or something. And the fourth thing it does is it creates this cumulative line. This cumulative line says how much the first one is taken up. So the first entry, Robert Downey Jr., which is the biggest, is at this point, which is around about the 50% mark. And this point, Chris Evans is around about 70, 75. And it adds on like that. The Pareto principle says that if there are 5 values here, the first one will get up to 80%. This is fake data, so don't get excited about it. But let's look at it with countries and populations. So these are the top 10 countries in the world. These are the real populations, and this is the percent cumulative that I've created. So if I go to insert a Pareto chart, this one and then this one, gives me the same kind of scenario. I can see that the first two, China and India, are way more than everyone else, 1.3 and 1.4 billion, although, wow, look how close they are. These are the real numbers, by the way. And then as you go on, it sort of plateaus a bit. So this number gets up to, between the two of them, it makes up 63% of the top 10. That's not quite the 80-20 rule, because there are 10 countries here, so this is 20%, but it is still pretty high, and we can see that that gets to more than half by just 2 out of the top 10 countries. So that's a cool example of an application of the Pareto chart and the Pareto principle. If you right-click and format data series, you do have some general charting options. you don't really have much in the Pareto chart for itself. You do for this line. You can sort of change the Pareto line by giving it no line. If all you want to do is see the values like this, you can do that. And you get a sorted bar chart that's also been aggregated. You can do that on its own. So that's pretty good. To summarize, you automatically get very thick bars that aggregate numbers together, sort them from biggest to smallest, and gives you this cumulative line as well. Thanks for watching.